Good evening. Welcome to the State Legislative Candidate Forum. My name is Paula Shapoulis, and I'm a certified leadership coach and a consultant with the Brainerd Lakes Chamber. I'm honored to be your moderator tonight, and we're proud to partner with all 5 area chambers of commerce, the League of Women Voters, and the Brainerd Dispatch to bring you this event. We have our flag here tonight, so let's start with the Pledge of Allegiance. Will you please stand? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. We'd like to thank the candidates, those in attendance, and those watching us on Facebook as well as the planning committee, our timers, screeners, and volunteers. A special thanks to Grandview Lodge for donating this beautiful space to host this tonight. Will you join me in a round of applause to thank all those involved? As you know, we all have a right to vote and a responsibility to make an informed choice. These forums are a wonderful opportunity to get to know our local candidates by hearing from them directly. Today's event will be live streamed on the Brainerd Dispatch Facebook page and will be available for viewing through Election Day. Our live broadcast is made possible by a grant from the Brainerd Lakes Area Community Foundation, so we thank them for allowing us to bring this to a larger audience. Tonight, of course, our focus is the state legislative races. As you likely already know, the Senate has 4-year terms, the House has 2-year terms, and all seats are up for election. So before I begin, I would like to make a few points. First, the views expressed in this forum are those of the candidates, not those of the forum organizers. Our organizers do not endorse candidates or political parties. We also ask our attendees to be as quiet as possible while the candidates are speaking so that everyone is able to hear. Please hold your applause until the forum has ended so that the candidates have all the time possible to make their points. No photography or video recording is allowed during this forum, but a video recording will be available on the Dispatch Facebook page through Election Day. So audience, you are welcome to submit questions for candidates either on these note cards provided. If you need one, you can kind of raise your hand. Colleen in the back has them, and she'll bring one to you. So, or if you're joining us by Facebook, feel free to write a comment in the comment section on that Facebook page. So questions that are unclear or hostile of a personal nature will not be used, and we do reserve the right to reword or consolidate questions in order to cover as many topics as possible. And we have a lot to cover tonight. So if your question does not get used, please feel free to stay after, and the candidates will be able to talk with you at that point. So each candidate will have 2 minutes for opening remarks. I will then ask a series of prepared questions. Something new this year is an opportunity for the candidates to ask their opponent a question. This will happen after the prepared questions, and then we'll finish with audience questions and closing remarks. All responses will have a time limit of 1.5 minutes, but in light of time, if I need to, I'll switch that to a minute, and I'll let you know. In addition to the candidates asking each other questions, our planning committee added another feature. The candidates will have the opportunity for a 30-second rebuttal twice during this forum. They each have cards. They have a blue card and a yellow card. So that's 2 chances. So hold your blue card up for the first time you want to respond, and I will call on you. You'll have 30 seconds then to make a rebuttal. Okay? To ensure fairness, we will rotate the order for answering. If time runs out, I will call time. But candidates, you're allowed to quickly finish your comments. So we'll start tonight's forum with our House of Representative candidates. We'll do a 10-minute break to switch then for our Senate candidates. Okay, so let's move on. Opening statements. So you have 2 minutes for your opening statement, and we will start with Mr. Herring.
Thanks, Paula. Thanks for everyone that joined us and that's watching. I got to say, after running in 2018 and doing all the parades, all the contact, meeting a lot of people and answering a lot of questions, 2020 is nothing like any of us have planned. And honestly, I think we all had other things in mind this year, including how things are going right now. I'm a father of 2 daughters, 2 granddaughters. My wife Jill has tolerated me for 30 years, so we had a lot of different plans for a 30-year anniversary this year. But what came to our concern this spring was the transition that was happening so quickly, like all of us were wondering what was going on, and observing how the legislature was addressing this and whether they were taking it seriously or not, and how that affected how people witnessed this, and whether or not we wanted to follow what science thought or we wanted to follow some opinions, whether we were going to wear masks, whether we weren't. So my concern in 2018 about the affordability of health care, education, housing, all of a sudden that was front and foremost for us this year. So our concerns have been magnified. Who's addressing that? Who's complying with it? Who's in our best interest right now? And whether or not, our legislative body is actually voting no to help out with COVID funding. COVID funding is being allocated to help, not just with our schools, but with our health care, and is our representation voting no? So I'd like to see some change.
Thank you. Mr. Poston.
Thank you very much. I'm State Representative John Poston. I look after District 9A, which is Southern Cass County, Todd, and Wadena County. I'm ending my 2nd term, running for my 3rd, and I serve on the following committees in the legislature: Agriculture, Food, Finance and Policy, Public Safety and Criminal Justice Reform, Corrections, and I also serve on the Legislative Water Commission. I am endorsed by the following: the Minnesota Chamber of Commerce, the Minnesota Farm Bureau, NFIB, which is the voice of small business in Minnesota, MCCL, our largest pro-life agency or organization, I am rated A with the NRA and endorsed by the NRA. I'm A+ rated and endorsed by the Minnesota Gun Owners Caucus. I am endorsed by the Minnesota Police and Peace Officers Association. And I live in Lakeshore, Minnesota with my wife Pam and our Cocker Spaniel Molly. And I would like to thank the League of Minnesota Voters, the Brainerd Dispatch, the Brainerd Lakes Chamber of Commerce, and Grandview for holding this event. We all enjoy coming to this event year after year. This is a little bit different than it's been in the past, and like Alex said, things have been very different. For me, normally I had about 20 parades. This year I had 1. For me, I normally had 4 county fairs. I had none. Lots of other community events were canceled. This has been very different. It's hard to door knock. It's hard to go out and do these things in this COVID environment, so it's been very, very different. But I'm very pleased to be here tonight, and thank you all for coming, and thank you all for being engaged.
Great, thank you. Mr. Heinzman, would you like to go next?
Sure, that's fine, thank you. I'm assuming that we're going to be sitting for most of this, so I'm going to just go ahead and remain seated. I'm glad to be here today. A lot of you know me, and I know a lot of you. I've served the last 3 terms, 6 years, representing District 10A as the state representative. Earlier, we heard that we're going to be submitting questions from the audience. And I'm just going to launch right into what I think is going to be the most pressing issue facing the state of Minnesota in the coming biennium. We have, by all accounts, what could be as much as a $6 billion deficit that we're going to have to wrestle with, which would be the largest deficit in the state's history, if I am doing the math correctly, coming biennium. That's going to affect education, potentially. That's going to potentially affect health care. It's going to affect roads and bridges. It's going to affect environment and natural resources. It's going to affect virtually everything. And so I hope that you're thinking about what that might mean for all of us in the state of Minnesota, and what that might mean for you personally. Could be something that might come into the form of a question today. If we don't deal with this issue very carefully, we could be looking at a huge problem for state and local government. Every time you hear about what we could be doing more tonight, which we all agree, when it comes to each of those categories I mentioned a few moments ago, we could be doing more. Think about that in the context of how do you pay for it? Because we are one way or another going to have to find a way, and it's either you raise taxes or you find cuts. That's what we're up against in the coming biennium.
Great, thank you. Mr. Menk, you're up next. 2 minutes.
Well, my name is Dale Mink. I am running for Minnesota House District 10A. I work here in the Brainerd Lakes area. I'm a building construction worker. I've lived in the Lakes area for 20 plus years, made a wonderful family here with my wife and our kids. Brainerd Lakes area is my home, and I want to take care of the people here. There's a lot of things that affect all of us: health care, making sure our kids have a good education, making sure that workers can earn a decent wage so that they can provide a good life for their families. And for a lot of people, the problems getting in their way have been compounded a lot this year due to the COVID-19 crisis. Now, my question is, do we deal with the crisis by using data and facts, or conspiracy theories and wishes? Do we adapt and overcome, or do we drag our feet, whining and crying the whole way? Yes, there's going to be issues with the state's economy and taxes coming up. And yes, we need to deal with that. But I think we need to remember that our economy is driven by the working people in our communities and the small business owners in our communities. So we need to take care of them people first. That includes better access to health care, good education for our children, living wages. We need to take care of the people in our state if we're going to expect our state to get up and overcome this obstacle. Thank you.
Great, thank you. Dale Lewick, you're up next. You have 2 minutes.
Thank you, Paula, and good evening, and thank you to everyone that is here tonight and those that will be viewing this. My name is Dale Lewick. I'm the current incumbent for House District 10B. That's all of Aiken County and a major portion of Crow Wing County. We've got over 80 townships in the district. A lot of 18 small cities. It's a big district with a lot of needs and a lot of issues. My legislative assignments currently are pretty well suited to the district. I serve on the Agriculture Committee, both Policy and Finance, and also on Environmental and Natural Resources Committee, both Policy and Finance. And those deal with regulations. They deal with all kinds of things to do with rural Minnesota, businesses, what we do here. Also, I serve as a member of the Iron Range Resources Rehabilitation Board, IRRB. I'm current vice chair of the Permanent School Trust Commission. I've served as chair of that. My lovely wife is here with me tonight. We've been married 51 years. I graduated from Aiken High School in 1967, grew up on a farm. We actually live on that farm, or at least my granddad's farm, and we still farm there. We've got 2 grown children. We've got 5 grandchildren and 2 great-grandchildren. So I look forward to discussing all kinds of issues tonight, and hopefully this will be very informative for everybody. So thank you very much for attending, and going to be a great evening.
All right, thank you. Gayleen Spolerich, would you like to?
Well, good evening, everyone. I'm not sure how I ended up at the end of the line here with all these gentlemen. Miigwech to you all for being here and allowing us to debate. I'm used to debating with children and staff, so this will be interesting for me. I'm an Indigenous mother of 3 grown children. I have 5 grandchildren, and I am a caregiver of 4 young children that we took in, my husband and I. We took in as foster children 6 years ago and now have permanent guardianship of them. So we've taken long distance learning as how we're going to school because my husband is an insulin dependent diabetic. So I thought twice about even coming because we don't get out much since COVID. And it's the grocery store and all of the absolute necessities. So I thought twice about coming and being in public, but there aren't that many of you here, so I'm okay with all of this. I've worked in local and tribal government for the last 25 years, so I spent most of my career working with children and families. So that's what is most important to me is people, the people, and working together for all of us, just not the chosen few. I was an essential worker. During the COVID, we were able to supply our families. And I look like I'm running out of time, but I'm excited for this. Like I said, I've only debated with children and staff, so this will be interesting for me. So I appreciate you all being here, and I hope to be able to visit whatever way that is that we're able to visit. Miigwech.
Right, thank you. So let's move into the questions. Mr. Menk, you will be the first to respond to this. So America's raw political divisions were on display during the presidential debate 2 nights ago. Minnesota has the only split legislature in the country, with Democrats currently controlling the House of Representatives and the governor's office, and Republicans controlling the Senate. Do you believe it's possible to bridge our political differences? And if so, how would you propose doing that in the state legislature? You have 1.5 minutes. Do you believe it's possible to bridge our political differences? And if so, how would you propose doing that in the state legislature?
You know, anything's possible. Yeah, right now things are, especially from the outside, things look pretty hopeless when you're talking about political divisions. And, you know, I guess I don't know exactly what the answer to deal with that is. All I know is people need representatives who are going to listen to their problems, take their viewpoints into consideration, and work to help make their lives better. Once we all come around to that idea, working for the people of Minnesota, I think things will work themselves out, but we need to be willing to look at each other's viewpoints and not just shut each other down the second we don't agree on 1 or 2 points. I think that's the answer, is to try to find a common goal and work towards that goal rather than trying to look for the differences between each other and fighting against each other on that.
Thank you. Mr. Heinzman, would you like to go next?
Sure, thank you. It's kind of interesting because more often than not, legislators agree. And that's low-hanging fruit. I'd say probably 90% of the time we're able to work on issues in a bipartisan way. In my first term, Senator Gazelka and I worked on the veterans pension exemption together. Senator Gazelka was in the minority, happened to have an opportunity as a participant in a conference committee, the tax committee, to bring up the issue, and I was carrying the other half of that language in the House. Obviously, that had to happen in a bipartisan way. Over in Cross Lake, there's a lot of conversation the last few years about the Loon Center. more things that we're doing in a bipartisan way. There are certainly issues where there's going to be a very much an abrasive conversation happening, and that's usually what media picks up and what the public sees. But more often than not, we're able to work together, and I think that a number of us have demonstrated that over our term in the legislature. So I am very optimistic that we're going to be able to continue to build on those relationships in a bipartisan way and continue to get things done for the people of Minnesota.
Thank you. Ms. Spolarich, you're up next. You have 1.5 minutes.
Suggest that getting community involved when legislators are making choices, making sure that all of the people that those decisions are being made on are a part of all of that process. As politicians, we need to look out for the well-being of all people within those boundaries that we are to care for. I would just be inspired by more community involvement and us listening to the people and what their concerns are and taking that into account, because we are in different times and working together is the only way to make things work, because that's all I've done my whole career is bridging people to resources, and this would just be another arm of bridging all of the people within my district.
Thank you. Mr. Lewick, do you believe it's possible to bridge our political differences? And if so, how would you propose doing that in the state legislature? 1.5 minutes to you.
Well, thank you. First of all, there's a perception, and what tends to make the news are folks that get up in front of a microphone, do a lot of shouting and jumping up and down. I find that we get stuff done. I've been there 6 years now, and we've been in the minority, been in the majority, both House and Senate. What really counts is the ability to work with everybody to the common interest of all of Minnesotans. My experience as a former member of the Aiken County Board, where there were only 5 of us there, and our focus was, okay, what's the issue? How do we resolve it in a rational manner? And that works in the state legislature. You'll find, as I believe Representative Heinzman mentioned, most of the things that pass through that legislature end up 126-7 and unanimous. So most of the good things do come out of there with strong support on both sides of the aisle. It's just something about being a grown-up and the ability to work for the common good. It's pretty basic stuff, and if you're not there for that reason, you don't belong there.
Thank you. Mr. Poston, you are up next. You have 1.5 minutes.
Thank you. I would echo what has been said by a couple of people, that there are some contentious issues that the parties seem to battle on, and each party stands their ground. But for the most part, we do work together, surprisingly well work together. I was in the majority my first term, and while I was in the majority, I worked with the minority. So now that I'm in the minority, the majority is working with me. So you create relationships across the aisle. You work with people that you can find common ground with and try to get some good things done. I've actually been able to get some bills passed in the minority because I've had majority members that I've worked with that have been able to take those bills or that legislation and get them over the finish line. So there is a lot of bipartisan work getting done. It's not as partisan as people probably think it is, because you see the really contentious stuff on the news. And I'm lucky to serve on a couple of committees that are very bipartisan, like agriculture. We all, regardless of what side of the aisle you're on, we understand the importance of agriculture, and we work together to make it better. Thank you.
Thank you. Alex Herring, would you like to wrap this up?
Thank you. I I guess I'd have to put my life comparison there as a designer and drafter working on hospital clinics, nursing homes. We had to build a big team of people that didn't necessarily agree or have a budget. And those projects always happen. Moving to this area where I worked with more custom homes and remodeling, we had the reality that people have a budget they have to stay in. We have a team that you have to be responsible to all sides and people involved, that we come through the project together. And the fact that we see some people grandstanding so much in politics when really it's dependent on all the people involved to get through that project, follow a budget, stay on schedule, and be responsible to who our clients are, is really, we're asking to work as a representative to our constituents. We're asking to represent their best interest and be there. So that's really how we should promote our business in the legislature. That would be what I'm comfortable doing, and I guess really where my success has been is getting people together that don't always agree, but work through and discuss how we can agree on what needs to get done.
Thank you. So our next question, Mr. Lewick, you'll be the first to respond. Here's your question. Minnesota became the epicenter of racial tensions and policing practices with the death of George Floyd this year. What additional police reforms, if any, could be made in light of recent incidents involving George Floyd and others around the country? 1.5 minutes to you.
Very relevant question. I say, first of all, the House and the Senate worked together, and we did pass some reforms, some important things that needed to be dealt with. One of the areas that we need to be cautious about is let's not brand our police officers in general as a major problem. And I think we just have to look to our local community here, look at our county sheriffs, our local police officers here in our area, and give them the best tools and the best training opportunities. And I spent time on the sidewalk down in South Minneapolis and St. Paul right after the riots and the burning and the looting that went on down there, talked to the people down there. Their concern was the police didn't come, they couldn't come, and not only did the precinct be burned down, but there are businesses all around it. So please don't confuse what happened down there with the way we do law enforcement here in rural Minnesota, at least in Aiken and Crow Wing County. We've got some top-notch law enforcement people. We just got to make sure that we back them up, give them the training and respect that they deserve.
Thank you. Gayleen.
We need to support the police force. What happened this has been happening for years. I live with the racial disparities. I'm one of them, and I still see that. And I would support more training for police as far as social emotional and sensitivity training. I don't think that we offer enough of that type of training to really train people or train the police force to really understand what it is that minorities are going through. And low-income people are put in that same place. We treat low-income poverty people the same as we do people of color. So that all needs to change in our state, because that's the only place I can make it change, is here.
Great. Thank you. Alex, 1.5 minutes to you.
Thank you. I think we need to rewind a little bit to Target Center. When we heard, when you get them in the paddy wagon, don't be gentle, rough them up a bit. and kind of gave the nod to Bob Kroll that that's the expectation. That's how we deal with people in someone's disturbed delusional sense. And that made it okay. That's wrong. I think we have to look at the people I grew up with and went to school with that chose law enforcement as a career, whether they're state troopers or Minneapolis policemen. I was very concerned about their health and well-being. We called their wives to check on them. So how do we help people be a peace officer and avoid the brutality that seems to be disconnecting our communities? Whether the law enforcement has to be more involved in the community, I know that's not always the case. But yeah, there has to be some discussion, some listening, some respect, and definitely some changes. Because if we think that chokeholds are the way to handle a $20 transaction, we have a lot of growing up to do. So thank you.
Thank you. John Poston, what additional police reforms, if any, could be made in light of recent incidents involving George Floyd and others around the country? You have 1.5 minutes.
Thank you. First of all, I support our law enforcement officers 100%. Having said that, there are some things that we can do, and like Representative Lueck said, the House and the Senate came to an agreement on, I want to say, 11 different measures that we put into place before the end of our regular session, or maybe it was in our first special session, I don't recall. I serve on public safety and criminal justice reform. Both parties are on the committee. We're working hard to make good, positive changes. I was asked by the Speaker of the House to be a co-chair of the Criminal Justice Reform Caucus that was formed between the House and the Senate, between the DFL members and the GOP members. And I'm very proud to have that position. We have done very little so far because that happened right as COVID happened. So, but it's something I'm looking forward to working on with DFL members across the aisle and with the Senate to make the right kind of reforms, the things that make sense. And I will guarantee you that the police officers will be involved in making those changes.
All right, thank you. Josh, you're up next.
So make no mistake, not just the state of Minnesota, but the entire country is at a crossroads as we're discussing law enforcement, law and order, and what is it that we may or may not need to evaluate or to look at more closely. Representative Poston brought up a few comments relative specifically to law enforcement in support, and I would echo those, Representative Lueck as well. The very first thing that we need to do, and we have been doing, I know probably a number of us did this, is pick up the phone and talk to our law enforcement locally. Find out what's going on in our towns. What is it that they feel is a concern and a need? A chokehold was brought up, and I was shocked to hear from law enforcement as they're involved in situations and their experiences. They were very concerned that leaders around the state and around the country immediately began making judgments about the facts in a situation that was virtually unknown and uninvestigated. We all saw shocking video. But then what should the reaction be? And then how do we move from there? And I think that we all agree that those conversations with law enforcement and with communities are important. Hopefully those takeaways and the solutions come from the facts as opposed to a very charged, emotionally charged situation.
Thank you. Dale Menk?
So yeah, this is a very difficult subject. I just want to point out, when you say the system is flawed, and our justice system is flawed, it disproportionately affects minorities and people who are on the lower income brackets. That's a fact. Now, when you say our justice system is flawed, that doesn't mean cops are bad. That means we need to work on it. We need to find solutions that don't just throw people in jail, that can help them become better people in their community. When we talk about police funding, maybe we should divert some of those funds to fund social workers and trained de-escalators, not to replace police, but to supplement the police, so that the police don't have that on their shoulders every time they go out to a call, especially with somebody who's having a mental breakdown or somebody who's autistic and is having a bad day. Second thing we also need to do is make sure that we have mental health facilities available. The funding in the state for that is abysmal, so that the solution isn't throwing somebody in jail for 3 days and then they don't get the help that they need. There's more solutions than just saying police are bad or police are the best thing ever. We know the system is flawed. It's time to fix it.
Thank you. John Poston, this next question you'll be the first to respond to. What is your evaluation of Minnesota's response to the COVID-19 pandemic, and how should the state move forward with addressing it?
Well, I would say that in the first couple of weeks of the pandemic, that the governor did a really good job. I would say after the first couple of weeks, the governor should have went back to working with the legislature. The emergency was immediate, and then it came into managing the pandemic. And I believe if the governor would have went back to work with the legislature, that certainly having the House and the Senate working with him to resolve these issues or to correct these issues would have been much better than one person doing it on his own. He made a lot of mistakes after those first couple of weeks, and I don't think as many mistakes would have been made if the legislature would have been engaged and brought back into the process. But we've been unengaged now since March. We haven't had a voice, and we are the voice of the people. And not a day goes by that I don't get at least 10 messages, phone calls, text messages, email messages, asking why their voices are not being heard through their representatives. So I think we should have went back to working the way government is meant to work, and it would have been much better at this point in time.
Thank you. Alex, what is your evaluation of Minnesota's response to the COVID-19 pandemic, and how should the state move forward with addressing it?
Well, we saw the failure of our legislators, at least our local representatives, when they could have been a cohesive worker along with the governor's cabinet and all the professionals involved. Instead, we had this, in April, a resolution to terminate the peacetime emergency. Now, I remember a lot of people were struggling then to figure out what was going on in their life. And then in May 2nd, Republican Minority Leader promised to block our bonding bill, which would be our jobs for the future. People are being unemployed. We saw that across the state. Now, everything that some of our legislators voted no against were loans that modified for public health emergencies, small business loans, grants, broadband. Who needed broadband during this? I remember that's how my business kept going. And telemedicine, housing assistance, personal care assistance, these things continued. Why did you vote no? Along with schools, funding for schools. This was part of the COVID funding, the relief fund for local government distributions. You defunded the police. Right here, June 19th. You did not do your job. Governor Walz had a full plate, and you did not do your job. Why is that?
That's time. Thank you. Mr. Poston, you have your first rebuttal card.
Well,
You have
first
30
of all,
seconds.
First of all, I would say that you know very little about the bonding bill, and the first one that came along was much too large, and there were many reasons why that bonding bill didn't get passed. Things like light rail in Minneapolis at $140 million a mile shouldn't be paid for by people out in greater Minnesota. So there's more to it than just agreeing to a bonding bill. The first one was ridiculous. It was full of junk, and I would have never voted for it. You talk about broadband. I've voted for broadband 13 times. I've co-authored 6 bills, and the only ones that I voted no to were because they were in big omnibus bills filled with junk.
That's time. Thank you. Mr. Menk, on to you. Mr. Lewick, we'll hold that thought. We'll go to Mr. Menk first.
All right, so the question was about the state's response to COVID-19, correct?
Yes, I
Okay.
can reread it again. What is your evaluation of Minnesota's response to the COVID-19 pandemic, and how should the state move forward with addressing it?
Okay, well, again, very difficult situation. I think Governor Walz has actually done the best he can. When trying to balance the safety of people and try to get our businesses back up and running to some degree, obviously not 100%, and a lot of people are hurting right now, I get that. What we were lacking was, honestly, action from the federal government. If we would have had those aid bills come through and small businesses and workers could have been taken care of, the real drivers of our economy, the people who actually spend money on things they need instead of siphoning up billions of dollars and holding on to it, not putting it back into the economy, we could have done a lot better. People could have stayed home, not worried so much about when they were going to get back to work or if they were going to be able to send their kids back to school so that they get back to work. Honestly, I think Governor Walz has done the best he can, and the obstructionism from some of our legislators hasn't helped. It's been a patchwork response because we're trying to balance 2 different realities, and it's a lose-lose situation. Hopefully, we can come to some sort of agreement on how to go forward and take responsibility for our actions and stop believing conspiracy theories and do what we need to do to get over this thing, and then we can get back to normal, get our economy back up and running, get our people back to work, get our kids back to school, and get back to normal.
Thank you. Mr. Lewick, do you still want to use your response?
Yes, please.
Okay. You have 30 seconds.
Okay, one of the things you have to do if you're going to be a legislature or want to be a legislature is get your facts straight. Thanks to the legislature, we pushed the governor to put $840 million out there to the counties for loans and all kinds of other funding. It wouldn't have happened without the legislature pushing on that. So be cautious. If you're going to get up and do things, get your facts straight. And I just take great umbrage with making careless statements about how I voted on particular issues when you don't know your facts.
Thank you. Josh Heinzman, you're up next.
Thank you. So there's a couple of things that need to be mentioned relative to the comments that were made a few moments ago. Representative Post and Representative Lewick have covered a number of them. I'm going to cover a couple other. Number one, if you look around the entire country, the response from Democratic governors has been almost the same. If you look around the state of Minnesota to the east, to the west, to the south, you've seen a completely different response than what we have come to experience from Governor Walz here in Minnesota. He has decided to go it alone, and I think that Mr. Mink's comment about him doing the best he can is a great comment because, unfortunately, he didn't do very good alone. And that's exactly the choice that he made, was to do everything that came to fruition here in Minnesota and continues to be in place with our businesses shut down and with mandate after mandate hurting my community, my district, refusing to listen. We'd have to write letter after letter even to get our dock workers to be able to access the lakes. And this governor would not listen. Look around the state. Look around the region. Minnesota has almost twice the per capita death rate of any of the states in the proximity to us. Why? Because this governor, in his infinite wisdom, decided to send COVID-positive patients into nursing homes. It has been a disaster under the Walz administration.
Thank you. Gayleen, would you like to go next? You have a minute and a half.
Governor Walz did, to me, in the work that I do, the best job that we would listen weekly to know what we were able to do or not do. And the unfortunate part about what he was asking or mandating us to do, not everyone followed that rule. So many people weren't wearing masks, they were out in public. That, to me, had we followed Governor Walz's orders better and did exactly what he asked us to do as Minnesotans, we maybe would have not had all of the outbreaks that we've had. But I truly support how he handled it, because every decision that we made in the education system was based on what those mandates were, and that's how we set up all of our protocols so that children could be safe while they were in our care.
Thank you. Mr. Lewick, you have your minute and a half response time.
Well, thank you. I say I spent 28 years in the military and dealt with a lot of very uncontrollable situations initially that you had to get a hold of, and I appreciate the governor did the right thing by shutting things down and getting our act together, getting our hospitals up to speed, do those things. But down the road, that business of not forming the team and getting the job done with everybody, he miserably failed with that, and he continues to this day. And I'll just give you one example for in our area here, the Developmental Achievement Center at Aiken. They specialize in caring for the permanently disabled among us, adults and young adults. It took us two or three special sessions to get the proper funding and relief so those folks could continue to serve those clients. Wouldn't listen. I co-authored bills with people across the aisle. I mean, we all tried. It was the governor's people that were standing here saying, oh, no, we don't want to do that. Would not listen. Well, it's taken us 30, 40 years to build those facilities up to care for our permanently disabled, and you can't run those without the funding, and he almost destroyed it. Now, he finally listened, and that stuff went through unanimously. But it took 3 special sessions, I believe, to get it done. Failure on teamwork.
Thank you. Just a reminder to the audience and those with us on Facebook, if you haven't had a chance to write your question, please do so now. We are moving into the part of our segment here where the opponents can ask each other a question. And Josh Heinzman, we're going to start with you. And you can ask Mr. Menk your question, and then we will switch. So we will only do 1-minute responses at this point in light of time. Go ahead.
Thank you. So Dale, one thing that caught my attention, a discussion that we've been having over the last few years has been an ongoing conversation about our Second Amendment rights. And last time we met, our debate also brought up a discussion around the Second Amendment, and I believe I saw that you had changed your position since 2 years ago. And I'm just curious what it was that has changed, and maybe you could help explain what that is.
Sure. So exactly what he's talking about is after those couple of weeks when we had several mass shootings a few days apart, I started thinking, well, maybe we ought to have a conversation about red flag laws. You know, making sure that somebody who is mentally unstable doesn't have access to their firearms. Now, this isn't just a single issue around mental breakdowns. I mean, obviously we need long-term care for those. There again, 3 days in jail is what amounts to responding to a person who's a danger to themselves or others nowadays. Other than that, I'm still not even sure if that's the right answer. Other than that, my stance hasn't changed. I'm a Second Amendment supporter. I do not support the banning of assault rifles. I do believe in the individual right to self-defense. And you know what? I have a permit to carry. I carry pretty much everywhere it's legal. So to say that I'm not in support of the Second Amendment would be inaccurate.
That's time. Thank you. Before we move to your question for Mr. Heinzman wants to use his rebuttal card. You have 30 seconds.
Thank you, and I appreciate that, Dale. That is an important issue that does need to be discussed, and I think this is a good place to do it. There's lots of big issues, that's one of them. But relative to red flag laws, folks, the last thing we need is neighbors calling in neighbors, spouses in situations where there may be separations and lots of other complicated scenarios playing into a discussion about firearms is a recipe for disaster. And I just want to make my position clear that I certainly wouldn't favor that. And I appreciate that, Dale, you would share. And it's controversial, but it's something that we're discussing here tonight. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Menk, would you like to ask Mr. Heinzman a question?
So, Josh, you pride yourself on being pro-life. You were one of 22 legislators that voted against the Alex Smith emergency insulin bill. Why would you vote against something that can improve the quality of life of a lot of your constituents and, in fact, save lives?
And Josh, you have 1 minute.
Really appreciate the question, Dale. I am the only legislator on this stage to vote against it, and I understand everybody's strong feelings about this issue. And my personal concern is about how do we handle these issues when it comes to private industry as the state of Minnesota. And what's the difference between forcing a company that produces insulin to provide their product for free compared to walking into another area of industry or business in the state of Minnesota and saying, we see a need over here, and as the big state of Minnesota, we're going to write legislation that mandates that you give your product away to somebody who is in need. That's a slippery slope, folks. And I appreciate the question because while on one hand, my heart is tugged just like everybody else's when it comes to this issue, the slippery slope is a concern that has to be considered, and the impact could be going forward very negative.
Thank you. We're next moving to, sorry, go ahead. You have your first response card.
Okay, I get it. I get where you're coming from, but nobody's asking these companies not to profit. People are asking these companies to not place profit over human life. If everybody had access to medical care, it's no secret I support a single-payer system, then these would be moot points. The state could bargain with these companies to come to a fair price and make sure people could access life-saving health care and medications.
Josh, you'd like to use your second rebuttal?
Thank you.
And that's your final.
So the fact is we are asking companies to make an adjustment that could very easily lead to a decision that would cause them to leave the state of Minnesota. And part of what that bill did is it required those industries that provide insulin, and there's three companies specifically, that if they're going to continue to do business in the state of Minnesota, they must comply with our rule. Guess what? They have the option to leave. And that would create a problem for people across the state that could be bigger than the accessibility problem.
All right, thank you. We're moving to Dale Lewick and Galen Spolarich. Dale, would you like to ask your question first?
Sure. We haven't talked a great deal about it, but we're going to be dealing with a $4.5 to $6.5 billion deficit that'll front and center January 5th of this coming year. We already spend almost 80% of the budget on education, health and human services, and higher education. So what do you see as how we're going to be able to resolve a clear budget deficit that is going to be upon us in less than 2.5 months. And
I would look at the 80% that the funds are going to currently and look at how efficient are they? Are they working? And if they're not working, then we need to shift where those funds are going. I would also like to see the tax code looked at, because I don't think that earners in Minnesota pay a fair tax. It's out of balance. The middle class is paying more in tax, so we need to look at how those taxes are being spent and who's paying those taxes.
Thank you. Gayleen, would you like to ask Dale a question?
I would. So, Dale, you sit on the IRRB board. So my question, and this has been on my hot plate for a while, the Fond du Lac tribe had submitted a grant for clean water through IRRB, but they were denied. So I guess I don't understand why they were denied an infrastructure to clean their water supply.
Dale, you have 1 minute to respond.
well, I hate to repeat myself, but if you're going to fill the shoes of a legislator, you have to get your facts straight. We tabled that request, and shortly thereafter, those funds were awarded to Mahnomen and Brookston, I believe it was, to improve their potable water system, a water tower and potable water distribution. So, again, you have to deal in facts if you're going to work on behalf of the public. So, the first comment that they were denied, they were never denied. And in fact, they were awarded, and they've got those. That process is moving forward. IRRB has already released that whole process. A lot of paperwork goes with it. Now,
That's
there was
time.
but again, please.
Thank you. We're moving on to Alex Herring and John Poston. Alex, would you like to ask your question first?
Yes, I would. I'd like to thank the League of Women Voters for sponsoring this evening's event. My question is for my daughters and my granddaughters, since they are the future. Women are more than half the single-parent wage earners, 2/3 of minimum wage earners, 2/3 of tip workers, 2/3 of seniors living in poverty. They're pretty key in the essential workers that are fighting to preserve our health care and our hospitals. And why are they not equal for pay, retirement benefits, or receiving access to affordable health care and child care? And maybe that would be a way to explain why the Republican House caucus both abstained from voting and then voted against the Minnesota Equal Rights Amendment, or HF 13, where equality under the law shall not be abridged or denied on account of gender.
Mr. Poston, you have a minute.
Yeah, I absolutely did vote no for that. It's not the Equal Rights Amendment that most people think, when they think of the Equal Rights Amendment of the 1970s, that said male or female, or a man or a woman. This said gender. And it was an interesting debate on the House floor because we came up with 158 different genders. And when we were asking the bill author or the carrier of the bill for the party, she had no idea what most of those genders were. The co-authors of the bill had no idea what any of those genders were. And this was leading us towards some things not equal rights, because if it had been man or woman, male or female, the board would have been solid green, everybody would have voted yes, and it would have passed automatically, all green. But this was taking us towards some things that scare a lot of people, like Planned Parenthood
time.
teaching sex education in our schools. So there's more behind this.
Thank you. Would you like to respond to that?
Yes, I really would, because I think the topic of sex education in our schools and in our community is a crisis right now, where we're looking at that sexually transmitted diseases have doubled this year, doubled. And if you try and get some, what would you call that, contraceptives, things like that, birth control, we're talking about there's only one doctor at Cuyuna Hospital out of 8 that is even going to prescribe
That's time.
reproductive health care to our children.
So, Mr. Poston, you can use a response card to that if you like.
Sorry, I'm
Okay, so
sorry.
you have 30
I
seconds.
I would say that, Alex, you probably didn't look at the Planned Parenthood training for schools. And I would recommend that you do. You go back and get the book and take a look at it, because these precious daughters of yours, and they are, and young ladies all over the state are. But when you're looking at a book, and I'm about to get really embarrassed, but I have to say it to make my point, but when they're recommending that young girls engage in anal sex and oral sex because they won't get pregnant in a book that they're going to use in a classroom in one of our schools, that is just wrong.
That's time. Thank you. Mr. Poston, would you like to ask Mr. Herring a question?
Yeah, I sure would. Alex, you've done some negative campaigning lately, and you've told some really untruths and didn't really have your facts right. But one of your themes is that I'm out of touch. So I want to ask you about a few of the things that you have put out recently. One is that, obviously you want to see legalized marijuana. And I would say that puts you very out of touch with District 9A and Greater Minnesota. You also made a comment on your social media that says you stand with Ilhan Omar. And I'd like you to kind of explain that, because that is really out of touch with District 9A and Greater Minnesota.
So, Alex Herring, you've got 1 minute to.
Is that one
Respond.
question or two? Do I get two response times?
You get 1 minute.
All right. It's a quick one. Yes, I feel that legalizing recreational marijuana would help address this deficit that we're looking, that's going to happen no matter what, to our tax base, where we're not interested in raising taxes for anybody. We're looking at alternative methods to find out if even marijuana is helpful, to do the research, to spend the funding to do the research, to open the freedom, where many seniors are looking at recreational marijuana as a solution to some of their anxiety issues. And we look at people suffering from epilepsy, where they have struggled to get their children a little bit of marijuana for medical reasons. So, yeah, the lockdown on this, I think, is actually, you are out of touch with how real people are looking at this could be a potential health. And what is wrong with standing with Ilhan Omar when she's talking about the big money that we're seeing polluting our government at the federal level and across the globe?
That's time.
Thank you.
Thank you. We're moving into audience questions. Ms. Bolerich, you're up first to respond to this question. And again, you'll have a minute to respond. Mental health has become a crisis that impacts families, law enforcement, social services, and the business community. What, if any, could the state do to address mental health issues? What, if anything, could the state do to address mental health issues?
Mental health issues are a crisis in our country right now. And when I talked about looking at the 80% and what's not efficient, we need to start looking at bringing mental health services into our education systems, our government systems, our businesses. We need to have a hub of mental health providers, because all of the bad things that happen, the root of the problem is generally someone that has mental health issues that they have never taken care of. So Iowa has a mental health hub where they have providers in every education system and in the businesses. So that is what Minnesota needs to help
That's time.
with the problems of mental health.
Thank you. Mr. Lewick, you have 1 minute to respond to.
Thank you, and that's an excellent question. We saw the dismantling of the old state hospital system some 40 years ago. And Minnesota, along with most states in the nation, did an atrocious job on rebuilding a system that took care of those people. We just shoved them out into society. So I agree with Galen that we've got to, within that finite pot of money, no new money, we need to go over and say, you know what, you're important, but there's another priority here, and that's push some of those dollars over into the mental health area, because when people do come back after they've been in treatment, we don't have a good network to make sure they don't fall back into issue either with addiction or stress. So and we agree on that one. There's a lot of work to be done in that area, and it's going to cause some pain because there's some other
And that's
folks
time.
are not going to be supported quite as well.
Thank you. Mr. Poston, you are up next.
Okay. Could you repeat the question?
Absolutely.
Yep.
Mental health has become a crisis that impacts families, law enforcement, social services, and the business community. What, if anything, could the state do to address mental health issues?
Well, I think there's many things we can do to address mental health issues. Myself, serving on the Agriculture Committee, we're working with mental health in agriculture, which has become a really big issue with the farm crisis that's going on out there. We've had many suicides in our farming community, and it just keeps going up and up. So I've been working with Minnesota State and with the University of Minnesota on supplying more counselors, mental health counselors for our farmers, and more farm business advocates. And it's really important because when these people start to fail in their business, it's not just a business, it's usually a family legacy. It's something that's more than a business. It's been in the family for many, many years. And failing, in a lot of cases, leads to suicide. So that's one of the areas that I'm personally working on.
Thank you. Mr. Herring, what, if anything, could the state do to address mental health issues? You have 1 minute.
Back in the 80s, I worked on some of the design teams for the Anoka Regional Treatment Center, and that was for all the treatment centers throughout the state. So there was a significant investment in doing something. In 2018, when I ran for office, we learned that there was one mental health counselor for all the farmers in Minnesota. One. And I'm pretty sure all of us have some family member or friend that's had to deal with some mental health crisis. And we run into them in the store and they're talking about their kid. You know, they went through a crisis with facing suicide or hurting themselves. They went to either jail here, which is the wrong place, not just for the person, but for the jailers themselves. They don't need to deal with that. But then they're transferred to Fargo, where there was a bed available, so they had to actually run back and forth trying to take care of their loved one. So, yes, there's significant investment that's needed.
Thank you. Mr. Del Menk, you're up next.
Well, I think the answer to this comes back to access to health care again. We need to make sure that people can access health care and make sure that health care includes mental health services and addiction services. When people can't access these things, they just relapse. People with addictions have more tendency to relapse when they don't have long-term care available. People who, again, have a mental break, go to jail for 3 days and then are released, there is no mental health care long-term for them. If we work on our medical system and make sure that mental health and addiction services are included in that, I think that would go a long ways towards helping people deal with their situation.
Thank you. Mr. Josh Heinzman?
I'm
You
going
have-
to try and talk fast on this one. There's a huge amount of discussion that we could have on this topic. Number one, I'm going to piggyback off what Representative Lueck was talking about with a change that happened in the state of Minnesota some decades back. That was due, just a little history, to a Supreme Court decision, and you can read about it, Google it. The Olmstead Act changed how states could operate their facilities. And each state took a position on that and adjusted their systems to try to comply with that decision. And many states took an extreme perspective and view, which I would argue Minnesota did. My solution would be we do need to revisit that. Representative Lueck is on the money. We need to be looking at how we can revisit that and readjust Minnesota's healthcare systems to make an adjustment and stay in compliance. So that's going to be a huge job, but it has to be done. And trucking on these folks, like Alex said, across the state's border to states that look at this whole discussion differently, it's not working. We need to fix this and get it right in the state of Minnesota.
Thank you. So we have time for one more audience question, and then we are going to do a quick, closing remarks, and then we'll do a quick break. So, Mr. Herring, you are up next to answer this question first. Higher education cost and student tuition continues to increase in Minnesota. What, if anything, could be done to increase college access and keep costs in check? 1 minute to respond.
I love this scenario. You know, as important it is to invest in our children's future and get them either technical school, some kind of occupation, or send them to college. What we look at with the high cost is the debt burden, because yes, there's loans available, and your financial situation may change while your child is in school, and suddenly you find you're in a higher interest rate of loan. But once they get out of school, and they may not be able to even find a job in whatever major that they attempted to complete or completed, what we see is that there's no real way to pay back a debt that even at a 6% interest rate means that that's double what you borrow. The $20,000 means $40,000 over the course of life. So we need to look at the interest rates. We need to look at this. If this is a government loan screwing not just children, our students, but parents who are also responsible co-signing
time.
those loans, congratulations, we could have a winner. Let's do that.
Thank you. Mr. Poston, you have 1 minute.
Thank you. You know, I agree that there certainly is a debt problem. I think we see more young people going towards what I used to call, or we used to call, trade schools, and looking for 2-year degrees or 1-year curriculum even, and coming out of that with really good jobs that have really good benefits and really good pay, and they don't have the debt. I'm really fortunate in my personal life. My daughter went to Bethel and to Central Lakes College. She actually graduated from Central Lakes College before graduating from high school, which took 2 years off of her Bethel education, which is a pretty expensive school to go to. But she graduated with 2 degrees and has a great job, and she has paid off all of her debt already. So it's possible to go to a 4-year school, to get that kind of education, go to that kind of school, and be conservative and be able to pay off your debt in a reasonable period of time.
Thank you. Josh Heinzman, what, if anything, could be done to increase college access and keep costs in check? You have 1 minute.
So there's an ongoing debate about whether or not we should pay for college education as the state of Minnesota, or even the federal government make college education free. And I've always kind of laughed, because here in the state of Minnesota, we have something that is absolutely unique, at least at its infancy. Now it's more common throughout the country. but the option for kids to be taking college in the schools or to be a full-time PSEO student is exactly that, free college education. We don't promote it. Most kids don't even know about it in the state of Minnesota. That's absolutely the first thing you do, is let them know that they currently have access to free college education right now. My son just graduated with his AA from Central Lakes College, and both my daughters, Liz and Kelly, are at Central Lakes right now, earning their AA. And it's free as a junior and a senior in the state of Minnesota. Incredible.
Thank you. Mr. Menk?
Yeah, I don't know if free is the right answer either. What Alex brought up, low or no interest loans, maybe even debt forgiveness after a certain amount of time if you go into a career that you went to school for. Post-secondary education, great option. Not everybody is going to be able to do that for their chosen career field. One thing that I think would help cut costs is stop the requirement that colleges give classes that don't pertain to the career that the person is going to school for. When you're paying per class, per credit, if you're taking classes that don't pertain to your career, you're going to rack up a lot of debt for no reason. But as far as that goes, those are the only possibilities that I have right now. Maybe if we can come up with a revenue stream, maybe free post-secondary education is an option. But for right now, I think no interest or low interest loans and getting rid of unnecessary credits is going to be quite a bit of the answer.
Thank you. Mr. Lewick, what, if anything, could be done to increase college access and keep costs in check?
Well, I'm going to take a little bit different tack on that. We've got an issue in our high schools. We destroyed the vocational education elements of our high school. We pushed that out 2 years into the junior college world. We've got to get our kids interested in all sorts of things, and not just some blind idea, I'm going to go to college. We've got some wonderful opportunities that we don't talk enough about. 49ers, operating engineers, become an apprentice, pipe fitters, master electricians. You know how you become a master electrician? You start out as an apprentice. Carpenters. There's just a whole realm of trade jobs out there that, guess what? They hire you, pay you. You got to go to school at night because you're putting in your 8 hours a day, 5 days a week. But down the road, really good careers, and we don't talk about that. We've just written it off in our high schools, and we need to start our kids down that road if that's what they want.
Thank you. Gayleen, you have a minute.
We need to invest in educating our high schoolers, because that's where we need to start. That's where they could be learning those technical jobs, because once they graduate from high school, what do they do next? We need to invest in on-the-job, more on-the-job with these youth, so that they can understand what it's like to actually have to go to a job and have that responsibility. We need to be more, we need to bring schools and technical colleges, technical programming in colleges together to instill that into our school systems. Just like AmeriCorps, work it off. We have a crisis with workers. That's how we put people to work. We put our youth to work learning job skills within the high school.
Thank you. We're moving into closing remarks. Mr. Menk, you will start us off. You have 1 minute.
When I first decided to run, it was because I felt that maybe some people in this area didn't have very good representation. I started thinking about it more and more, and turns out there's a lot of reasons I'm running. Because people need access to health care. People need a good education. People need good jobs. The environment. There's a lot of reasons I'm running. a lot of reasons, but it all boils down to one simple concept. I want to help the people of Minnesota create a good quality of life for themselves or their family, create the best life that they can for themselves. I want working people to be able to make a good life. That's it. That's all there is. I just want to help make sure that people can make a good life for themselves. You know, there's a guy, Paul Wellstone, used to say, we all do better when we all do better.
Thank you. Josh Heinzman, you are up next for your closing remark of 1 minute.
So this has been really, really nice. I've enjoyed the new format. Nice job to the chamber and to the league. It's been great to have the opportunity to speak and talk to the people of District 10A as to what my views are and my perspective on a number of issues. If people would like to reach out to me further, my cell phone number is out there, 218-820-5674. It's been that way since I started in the legislature, and it'll continue to be available. Anybody wants to give me a call personally and maybe discuss an issue further. Really thankful to have a number of endorsements, and endorsements do matter. I'm endorsed by the NRA, Minnesota Concerned Citizens for Life, National Federation of Independent Businesses, Minnesota Grocers Association, Care Providers, Housing First, Minnesota Gun Owners, the Minnesota Chamber of Commerce, and then the Farm Bureau, and last but not least, MPPOA. Proud of those endorsements, and if you'd like to know more about what they're about, feel free to check into them and see what their opinions are of us as legislators.
Thank you. Galen Spolarich, you have 1 minute.
I'm running because I am passionate about helping people. That's all I've done my entire career, is helping people. I've been fortunate enough to be able to raise a family in our rural community, and I would like to see livable wages, health care for all, great education systems, a mental health system that supports all of the people that really need it. I'm passionate about being a voice for all people, and not just for profit or unpractical reasons. I would be the voice for everyone, mostly the underrepresented, because that's what I've spent my career doing.
Thank you. Dale Lewick, your closing statement. You have 1 minute.
Well, thank you to everyone for participating, and a special thanks to the League of Women Voters and the Chamber and all the technical folks that have helped put this thing on. A really good format. I hope you've got a perspective on how each of us think and what we're thinking about in the future. I'm looking to run for re-election again, obviously, because I really enjoy the job. I think I can make a difference. I can continue to put my experience to work for people. There's two parts to this. You see all the stuff that goes on in St. Paul, but the really important thing that keeps me going every day is the phone calls and the emails that I get from individual constituents where I have the opportunity to help them to wade through a mess with a state agency or some other issue that they're dealing with in their life. And that's what one of the most important things a legislator can do, and it keeps you in touch every day with the people that sent you to St. Paul. So thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Poston, 1 minute to you.
Thank you very much. Again, thank you all for being here and for being engaged. This is great to actually be in a room with people for a change. We've been living in this Zoom world for a long time now, so it's nice to actually be in a room and see people face to face and talk to you. Again, thanks to the sponsors. Thank you for all of you for being engaged. I want to I'm running for another term because I want to continue to do a good job, which I think that I've done, and I enjoy my job. And like Dale, I enjoy the constituent part of it more than maybe the St. Paul part of it. And that's what's really important to me, is being available and accessible to everybody in the district. And I want to continue to do that. And I have some things I'd like to get over the finish line that I haven't. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Herring, you have 1 minute for your closing remark.
Thank you. We reflect on how our life's been, what we've done. I went to Votech. I earned a degree that gave me an occupation that I was able to feed my family, house my family, but there were still challenges. There's always retraining in life. There's always struggles. There's changes in health. And those things that I think so many people are focused in their own lives, trying to get through, to get their kids to school, get their kids to activities, get to work, get home, stay healthy. And at this point, we got our kids out of the house, and I thought, these are the struggles that everybody goes through, and these are the things that mattered to me, was the high cost of health care, the affordability of education. And being a general contractor, I know where housing is a huge problem. That's what I wanted to bring to St. Paul and to serve our community better. And now we're looking at situations where we need legislators that are there for people. So thank you very much tonight.
Thank you. Thanks to all the candidates for being here tonight. We appreciate your time. So we're going to take a 10-minute break to switch out our House of Representative candidates for our Senate race candidates. Oh, yeah. A round of applause. Thank you. a lot. Yeah. Yeah. Okay, thank you. All right, we'll get started in just a minute. Please have a seat. All right. Welcome to the Senate. Welcome to our Senate candidates. We appreciate you being here. To review, each candidate will have 2 minutes for opening remarks. I'll then ask a series of prepared questions. Something new this year is an opportunity for the candidates to ask their opponent a question. This will happen again after the prepared questions, and we'll finish with the audience questions and closing remarks. In your responses, you'll have 1.5 minutes, but we'll probably reduce that to 1 minute at some point along the way. In addition, our planning committee added another feature. The candidates, you'll have a 30-second rebuttal twice during this forum. You have the 2 cards in front of you. Do you all have your 2 cards, 1 and 2? So if you want to do a rebuttal, hold up your card once your opponent is finished with their response. Okay, so let's move into opening statements. We're going to start with you, Mr. Paul Gazelka.
Well,
you have 2 minutes.
How's the sound good? Good evening, Paul Gazelka, Senate District 9. Also, the privilege of being the Senate Majority Leader, so the leader of Minnesota Senate. Just an incredible privilege, and I want to use that privilege to bring the state together. So not just for rural Minnesota, which is what I represent, but the suburbs and Minneapolis and St. Paul as well. And so that has been my endeavor. When I took over in the Senate, I quoted Micah 6:8, which is, "This is what the Lord requires of us. It's to do good or justice, to love mercy, and to walk humbly before your God." And so I said, this is what I want as my leadership. And to the Democrats who are now in the minority, I said, if I don't fulfill that, let me know. And so the Senate has worked amazingly well together. We're a cohesive group, and we frankly led, and the reputation at the Capitol is that we are the adults in the room when we're trying to find solutions. And finally, I'll just say, too, I'm endorsed by the NRA and GOCRA for guns, MCCL, which is pro-life, NFIB and Chamber are the 2 main business communities. But also, I think it's important that you know that I'm also endorsed by the 49ers. That's the heavy equipment operator unions, the pipe fitters, the carpenters union. And I say that because I've figured out how to bring the business community together and the trades community to make sure that we're creating jobs in Minnesota. If you have one and not the other, you're really not going to solve what you want to do. And finally, the Minnesota Police Officers Association endorsed me and worked with me as we worked through police accountability in one of the special sessions. So particularly proud of the groups that are behind me. There's quite a few others. Those are the ones I think really spell out the fact that I can build a broad coalition. And again, it's just a privilege to be here and to serve you as my constituents.
Thank you. Mr. John Peters, you're up next with your opening remarks.
I'm not quite as well known as Senator Gazelka here, so I'm just going to give a little bit about my life and where I'm from. I live in Browerville with my wife, who's a nurse, Kathy. Together we have 6 children and 8 grandchildren. Basically, I've been an award winner in teaching education. I've been an award winner on technical issues. I won the Governor Pawlenty Entrepreneur of the Year award a few years ago, or several years ago. One of the things is I'm basically a scientist. I base all of my decisions on facts. If the Republicans have a good idea, I'll listen to it. If the Democrats have a bad idea, I will look at it. Also the fact that I will also change my mind. If my first assumptions are wrong, I will then change my mind to go with what is right based on the facts. I have special interest in healthcare because of my personal relationships and problems, personal work in education, personal work on small business and farms, also on the environment, and then really would like to thank you for giving me a chance to give my ideas to all of you, both here and on Facebook.
Thank you. Ms. Carrie Ruud, you are up next. 2 minutes for your opening statement.
Thank you and good evening. I'm Senator Carrie Ruud from Breezy Point. I live right in the heart of Senate District 10. My husband and I have been small business owners for over 30 years in our community, and I'm the former mayor of the city of Breezy Point. My children went to Pequot School, and now I'm lucky to have my grandchildren close by, so they also attend Pequot Lake School. In the Senate, I'm the chair of the Natural Environment Committee and Legacy Finance. I serve on Veterans and Long-Term and Care and Aging, which is especially good for this district because Aitkin County has the highest median age of any county in the state of Minnesota. So seniors' issues are very important in this district. I am very vested into my community. My husband and I have been very involved for many years, and I really enjoy representing my community. And I have a litany of, like many people, of endorsements. But the best endorsement I can have is from the citizens of my district. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Steve Samuelson, you have 2 minutes.
Hi, everybody. Thanks for coming. My name is Stephen Samuelson. I was born and raised in Brainerd. My father and mother are out there in the audience. My dad was a representative and the state senator here for a number of years. So I grew up around politics. And I've seen it kind of evolve over the last 50 years. It used to be a lot of fun, and it's getting kind of rankus, it seems like, lately. And I would like to, it's not bad on the state level. It's just this federal stuff makes people not want to be around politics, and it saddens me because I would like to see younger people get involved. It's really hard for people to want to work together when they just spent 6 months calling each other names. So I really don't care for being labeled either a Republican or a Democrat. Just a person who wants to represent all the people and do the best job you can. Everybody up here is in their heart. They want to do a good job and feel that they're doing whatever they think is right. So appreciate your time. Thank you.
Thank you. We're going to move into the questions. Some of these questions may sound familiar. Our planning committee decided to keep the same questions for the reps and senators. So this first question goes to you first, Mr. Peters. As you know, Minnesota has the only split legislature in the country, with Democrats currently controlling the House of Representatives and the governor's office, and the Republicans controlling the Senate. Do you believe it's possible to bridge our political differences? And if so, how would you propose doing that in the state legislature? You have 1.5 minutes.
Okay, I believe in personal relationships. One of the first things I would do if elected would be go meet all of the Republican senators, just so we have an idea that we can talk back and forth with each other. I have actually worked in committees, and we've had to make presentations to CEOs, we've had to make presentations to senators. When I was working a technical job once on the space shuttle, my group had to share a tie, and we would, as we go in to talk, we would give the next guy the tie, write down the list on there. So it's just personal relationships, making sure that you work on the problem and not on the person. So that's all I really have to say. It's all down to people.
Thank you. Mr. Gazelka, you have 1.5 minutes. Do you believe it's possible to bridge our political differences? And if so, how would you propose doing that in the state legislature?
It is all about relationships. I think John is right on that issue. If you build a bridge, it's amazing what you can get done. Last year, working with the governor in the House, we passed a 2-year budget, which is extremely difficult to do even if you're all on one side. This year we passed the police accountability bill. Frankly, it was myself working with Speaker Hortman, who's a Democrat, to get that done. But it is first about the relationship. Do you trust the person you're working with? Do you keep your word? Are you kind? I tell everybody I lead with kindness. There are times that you have to be firm. There are times you have to be aggressive to make your point, but you can do it with respect and honor, and I think I've proven that I can do that.
Thank you. Mr. Steve Samuelson, you're up next. You have 1.5 minutes. Do you believe it's possible to bridge our political differences, and if so, how would you propose doing that in the state legislature?
Well, it's been happening, every year for I don't know how many years. They have to balance the budget. If it's one party that controls all aspects of it, they're going to be fighting amongst themselves, about what the priorities are. So it always happens. It has to happen. They have to balance the budget. They like to wait till the last second before they, trying to work things out. But it always seemed to work out. To me, I've been a salesman, and the only really good deal is when both parties can walk away feeling that they got a good deal. And so that's what I believe in, is having everybody share in the good stuff that happened.
Great, thank you. Carrie Rude, you are next, 1.5 minutes.
Thank you. I think I served 4 years in the minority, and when we took the majority, I told myself that I would always remember how I was treated in the minority, and I wouldn't allow it to happen to the people that were in the minority now. And so as chair of my committee, I have a great buy-in from all of my minority members. They are allowed to carry bills. We hear their bills in our committee. My lead minority member carries some of the big, tough bills, because I know that if they are part of that conversation, that when that bill gets to the floor, we have passed our legacy bill and our Lessart-Sams bill, which I'm in charge of, by unanimous in the Senate. And I'm very proud of that fact, because we treat everyone with respect. I think the Minnesota Senate should be very proud. I'm very proud of our leadership in the Senate and how we relate to other senators, and we respect their point of view. We might not always agree on the issues, but when we can have good conversations and respectful conversations, we get the job done.
Great, thank you.
And I have 30 seconds.
Go ahead,
I have
sorry,
30
I thought
seconds.
you were done.
I just want to
Go
say
ahead.
that Don Samuelson and I, this shows bipartisanship, we rode with Congressman Oberstar miles on the Paul Bunyan Trail to get it paved. And so we didn't always agree on the same, we are on the same page, but we worked for the same goal. So I just wanted to shout out to you, Sam. It was a good time.
Thank you. So this next question will go actually first to you, Carrie. Minnesota became the epicenter of racial tensions and policing practices with the death of George Floyd this year. What additional police reforms, if any, could be made in light of recent incidents involving George Floyd and others around the country? You have 1.5 minutes.
Well, in the Senate, we did pass some reforms, and it was on a bipartisan basis, and I was very proud of that fact. But as a small town mayor, my police department was really important. It's the backbone of our community and who we were. And so we had community policing. Our police officers came into our businesses, and they came in and they talked to us, and they made sure that the community members knew who they were, that they could go to them if they needed help. We also had the police in the schools, and I'm really saddened that the schools in Minneapolis have taken their police officers out, because what better way for children to know that the police officer is their friend and that they can rely on them than to have them every day in the school, that it's someone that they can go to, someone they can confide in, someone that they can talk to. And so I think that we really need to stress that, especially our schools have great relationships with our police officers in the school. We need to make sure the cities have the same relationship that we have in Greater Minnesota.
Thank you. Mr. Samuelson, you're up next.
I agree with Carrie. Police officers have a very tough job, and I've always respected the police, even when I did something wrong and they were talking to me. You know, I don't know what they had to experience a half hour before I come along, you know, and so always been very respectful to the police, and I think that you know, community policing is the best thing that the police can do. We don't have people walking the beat, you know, up here. They're in the cars, but in the cities they're supposed to be walking the beats, and it saddens me they're not in schools down in the cities. We didn't have them when I was growing up, but they need them now. So,
Thank you. So, Mr. Gazelka, your response is next.
So this is something that I was very involved with and went into Minneapolis and St. Paul probably 8 to 10 times, sometimes anonymously and sometimes with groups to figure out what in the world's going on down there. But the number one first conclusion was I will never defund or dismantle the police, which is what all of the city of Minneapolis City Council wants to do. It's remarkable to me. They asked for 400 more police officers in January, and they didn't give them those. I think they gave them 14, and so they can't go out and develop relationships because they don't have adequate manpower. But we still came together and passed probably a dozen or so reforms. One of them was changing arbitration so that a bad cop is easier to remove. We did training for mental health, for autism, for cultural awareness. We banned chokeholds and a bunch of other things. And so we have to figure out how do we move forward from this place. And it's I talked to a number of people from the black community, and it is a sense that they don't have justice. And so without a doubt, I want to make sure that's one of my core beliefs is justice for all. But how do we navigate through this place where there's this tremendous disrespect for the police? Met one police officer that had a brick hit his face and paralyzed the side of his face. I talked to the wife of a police officer last week who was shot in the head, still living just because they're doing their job, and that should never, ever happen.
Thank you. Mr. Peters?
Okay, first of all, defund the police is the worst term that some Democrats ever came up with, because that's not what they meant. Well, I know the Republicans do much better at wordsmithing than we as Democrats. Defund the police means that we reallocate responsibilities to make the job easier, and that term, defund the police, does not reflect that at all. Now, I know there's a big difference between what we see out here and what they have in the city. The problems are greatly different. What I've seen from our local police is that we have the attitude of protect and serve. What I see from some of the policemen in the larger cities, and I've lived there, and I have a stepson that is a policeman in Des Moines, is that there's a feeling of opposing and of law and order, that they have to maintain things. I think it's really helpful to help the police take some of the jobs off of them that they don't shouldn't have to do, prevent problems happening before they actually happen. And then also, I just kind of think that all the policemen within the next 10 years should all have an AA, just like the nurses do with that, and get recertified every 2 years. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Gazelka would like to use his first rebuttal card. You have 30 seconds.
I think this is important because defunding or dismantling the police, they didn't want them to use rubber bullets or tear gas when the 3rd precinct went down. Some of their ideas are they don't need any guns. I mean, it's like, if that's not defunding or dismantling the police, I don't know what is. And then they want, on the police board or the post board, they want citizens to determine what police conduct should be rather than expert police officers, which is what we do on every board. An accounting board is accountants, a lawyer board is a law board is lawyers, but somehow the police shouldn't have experts deciding what to do. And so they absolutely want to do things that would lead us in the wrong direction.
Thank you. This next question, Mr. Samuelson, you'll be the first to respond. What is your evaluation of Minnesota's response to the COVID-19 pandemic, and how should the state move forward with addressing it?
I was glad to hear people's response earlier to this. I think the governor did the right thing in the beginning. A friend of mine owns a restaurant, and I would go help him every Sunday morning cooking breakfast. And he used to be a nurse for emergency rooms, and very, very smart on health issues. And before the governor even shut down, Ray was talking about, that we might have to close the restaurant because it is a new thing and nobody really knew how bad it was going to be. And we still don't know how bad it is or the effects. I know the governor's getting grief for this thing that could be continuing on. I wish that we had a better response on the federal level, and that it shouldn't be politicized the way it was. And so now it is what it is, and we need to work together on this. One thing I guess I do kind of want to agree with is that I got 10 seconds left. And I bet you they'll do a better job next time. Thank you.
Thank you. Carrie, would you like to go next?
Thank you. In Minnesota, we have 3 co-equal branches of government, and that's how we govern in the state of Minnesota. So when the pandemic first happened, there was a lot of questions. We didn't know who was to do what, and so it was an emergency. And I think we were all happy to give the governor the emergency powers, but that emergency has long since dissipated. We have in the Senate. And I'm sure the House has members like this too. I just don't know them so personally. But we have a finance chair in Senator Julie Rosen, who's brilliant. And we have a Health and Human Services chair, Senator Benson, who's amazing. And to not avail the state of those people and their talents to guide us through something that we need to have all the voices that we possibly can have, the advice that we can give, the people that can have voices and to say and to represent our communities. When the governor opened up slowly, and he opened up the people that mowed the lawns, but he didn't open up the dock workers, and the people that mowed the lawn couldn't mow the lawn because the docks are on the lawns. And so, not getting any advice from Greater Minnesota on how we could do things, how we could open up golf courses safely, how we could really do this well. I think more voices and more representation is a better idea, and I'm hoping that the governor will see that going forward.
Thank you. Mr. Peters, what is your evaluation of Minnesota's response to the COVID-19 pandemic, and how should the state move forward with addressing it? You have a minute and a half.
Yeah, this is a very emotional subject for me. I lost a month of my life having very serious COVID. I still have breathing problems on here. I heard earlier about the fact that Minnesota has a higher death rate than the surrounding states. But right now, those surrounding states, Minnesota's positive rate right now is 4.8%. I've heard 22%, 18%, and 14% of the surrounding states around us. Now, my personal feeling is that the death rate is not nearly as important because the death rate here started earlier and is still going to be happening. But there's going to be 5 times as many people that have long-term illnesses because of COVID on this. So, like I said, it's a B. There was a little bit of a problem at the start on shutting down. There's still some confusion about what must be done. But I also think that if people would have bought in 4 months ago on doing the right things, that we would be out of the problems right now and we would be going fine. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Gazelka.
Well, thanks. The first month, there was cooperation. We gave the governor $500 million to get personal protection equipment and make sure we had ICU beds and ventilators, and that was really smart because we had no idea. The governor said if we shelter at home everyone, our science says that only 50,000 people will die. So science didn't know exactly what to do. They were doing the best they could. At that point, I told the governor that I think you should only shelter at home seniors, and I think I would add vulnerable to that because I could see what was happening around different places. But instead, we sheltered everyone, and it wasn't 50,000 people that died. We have about 2,000 people. That's still serious. The vast number are over 70. Most of them are in nursing homes where we really botched it. Putting people that had COVID into the nursing homes was a huge mistake. And so as we're moving forward now, that's the governor and I, this has probably been the biggest contention, the riots and how he handled them, and COVID after the first month or so, beginning with sheltering at home everybody, and then shutting down businesses and shutting down schools. The businesses, 40% of hospitality may go out of business because of how we're doing this. And looking at other states like Wisconsin and South Dakota that didn't do that, and those two states have lower death rates, and the fact that they're moving forward and have been okay as a result of how they're doing it is the part that we just need to pay attention. And then the other side of that is the economy. Those states don't have the debt that we now have because of the decision that the governor made.
Thank you. Mr. Peters, you would like to use your first rebuttal
Yeah,
card?
I would
You have
just
30
like to
seconds.
Huh?
You have 30 seconds.
Okay. I'd just like to say that the states around us are going to have the problem, plus the fact right now around 20% of the people that have COVID with serious conditions are under 40 years old. There's some studies that are really contradictory about young people, and I do know that the elementary kids probably will not show symptoms, but we do not know what's going to happen to these people in 5 years because they had COVID now with no symptoms. I know at least 2 people that had no symptoms are now showing problems with their breathing and with their balance.
Thank you. I'd just like to remind the audience, if you haven't had a chance to write in your question, you certainly can still do that. We have people that can come around and get them, or if you need a card, just raise your hand. Those on Facebook, you can put your question in the comment, and we do have people monitoring that. So on to question number 4, Mr. Gazelka, you'll be the first to respond. After several years of budget surpluses, Minnesota is projected to have at least a $4.7 billion budget deficit in this fiscal period. This deficit will affect the lives of many Minnesotans. In your opinion, how should the state balance the budget?
Well, first of all, we had a $2 billion surplus before the governor shut everything down, and now let's think about how much that has switched in that short period of time. In April, I told the governor, I think you need to cut each agency 5% right now. That would save $100 million a month, but they have not done that. Not April, not May, June, July, August, September. Now we're into October, and they're not reducing spending. The last time we had a big budget shortfall, each agency cut 5% in 2011. They did it willingly because of the situation we're in. So that still needs to be the step that we have to take. Here's the good news. I think we're going to get out of this quicker as people realize that we have to get back to work and figure out how to navigate our lives. The market's coming back as well. And so where we're at now versus back then in 2011 is every pot of money is full. All the reserves were full. Every pot is full. And so between reducing each agency 5% and looking through the pots of money, that's where I think we should go. What I refuse to do is raise taxes. We already are the second highest income tax rate in the country, second highest. We're very high up on the sales tax, very high up on gas tax. All the different taxes, we're already up on the top. So it's not about taxing your way out of this. We got to figure out how to do it better. For the last 8 years, we've grown a little over 4% a year, so we do have some room to reduce some spending.
Thank you. Mr. Peters.
This is going to be very tough on a lot of people. I personally feel that we're going to have to make some major cuts, not have some growth in some very needed programs, but also I think at a certain point we need to raise some taxes on some people. if I were to look at it, if we were to raise taxes for $100,000 for a single person in the state of Minnesota, 95% of the people wouldn't get their taxes raised. And in our district, 99% of the people wouldn't get their taxes raised as we go through this. I believe Governor Walz has proposed now a 10% cut, didn't he? Okay, that's. I wish he would. Well, that's what we're getting back from our stuff. But if we do that, slowly raise tax, just have a little tax rate for between $100,000 to $400,000 per person or $800,000 per couple, and then raise it a little bit more for those. I think that's probably the best way. Cuts with very small taxes, no new property taxes, period. And I think that's one thing we're going to have to do.
Thank you. Ms. Rude, in your opinion, how should the state balance the budget?
Oh, goodness. You know, we've all talked about how by January we're going to have a $6.6 billion budget deficit. So it's going to be a big challenge. If you put it in perspective, our budget right now is almost $50 billion in the biennium. And so just to keep the spending that we have now would take a 10% cut. Just to keep the spending that we have now, with no additional spending. So it's going to be a challenge, but I think a lot of things, we can reimagine education. We need to fund education, but what is it going to look like now? Because we have distance learning, we have hybrid learning. I think kids should get back to school, but we need to figure out how that funding looks like. You know, in my legacy committee, I insisted when I took it over that we have a 5% balance in every fund for the rainy day. And so it's raining. So I think my legacy bill would be fine because we have the cash put away to still have our projects go forward. And I think that we have done that as Republicans in the last 4 years in the Senate. We have put some things in place that will help us get through this deficit. And I think we'll, at the end, the economy will recover, and we as Minnesotans will work together to get it done.
Thank you. Mr. Samuelson, will you like to finish up this question?
Yeah, these deficits are always a struggle. My understanding is the last time that we had a very, very bad deficit problem was in 1980. And I think their special session lasted almost 7 months. Everything had to be on the table to get it balanced. And that seems to be the situation that we're in now. Nobody likes to raise taxes. Some taxes are worse than others, especially when you have property taxes and people are on a fixed income with Social Security or something, and staying in their home, and then all of a sudden they can't afford it because of the property taxes. So I think everybody needs to sit down, all these chairs, and the governor, and start working on that issue now, because it's coming, and don't want to be sitting there next May, the last day of session, and trying to figure out what we're going to do. So I would like to see everybody start getting together now on that. Thank you.
Thank you. So we're now going to move into the segment where you have the opportunity to ask your opponent a question. Mr. Peters, you will be up first, and you may ask Mr. Gazelka a question. We'd like you to keep your questions to 30 seconds if possible, and the responses to a minute. So, Mr. Peters.
As you know, we probably disagree very strongly about the seriousness of the current status of COVID in the information. The numbers I am seeing coming out right now, that it is starting to hit the young people much worse than it is, and I'm actually more worried about long-term effects than I am about people dying, even though I don't want to die, and I thought I was going to. But on there, Senator Gazelka, how would you feel if you were wrong about your idea and one of your loved ones had long-term life effects?
Well, first of all, let me just say I think that the virus is serious and that it's a pandemic. Some people say that I don't think it's serious, and I think it's very serious, but I also think that we have to figure out how to manage through. We have to get kids back in school. They're falling farther and farther behind. One person under age 20 in Minnesota has died from COVID. Go back to the N1H1, it was 477 kids across the United States that died, and we didn't close down schools. And so we have to figure out how to manage through this serious virus, and part of that is following the CDC guidelines, not mandates. When the governor can mandate everything, he can say at the exact same time that 50 people can be in a bar, but only 10 people can be in church, and don't you dare sing. You know, so that's what we get when we have forced mandates. But instead, we need to take this serious, follow CDC guidelines, and manage through this the best we can. Otherwise, if we don't have enough money coming in because we've closed down the businesses, then we don't have money for the homeless. We don't have money for housing and welfare and mental health and all the other things that we all agree are important, but now we don't have the resources to do. So this is a difficult time. We have to come together as a country and also as a state to manage through it.
And Mr. Peters, you would like to use your 30-second
Yeah, I'll use my
rebuttal?
last one here. H1N1 is vastly different than COVID-19 because we got the symptoms almost right away, and we knew who had it right away. COVID is stealthier. 90 some odd %, we don't know that they ever had it. But they can give it to someone else. I believe in education needs to be taught. I actually taught hybrid courses, but what it is
time.
I think, let me just finish this one sentence. I think the long-term effects are going to be much worse than the deaths.
Thank you. Mr. Gazelka, do you have a question for Mr. Peters?
I noticed that you didn't fill out the NRA, which is for the guns, and MCCL, which is pro-life. So where do you stand on those issues?
You have
Questions, but,
one.
You can take either one.
Well, on the NRA, I was just signing in my rifle for deer hunting just the other day. So I'm 90% Second Amendment person. I do believe that people that have mental illnesses or that have been charged with felonies probably should not have guns. Again, it's different out here than it is out in the cities with the NRA, with the red grip laws. I completely trust our sheriffs up there because they wouldn't take any guns away unnecessarily. As far as abortion is concerned, first of all, I'm against abortion personally. But I'm not the person that circumstances says that I have to have abortion. I mean, you can't have an abortion or would need an abortion. What happens with abortion on here is there has been no studies. I've looked at 3 studies, and by making it illegal and not allowing access, we have not reduced the number of abortions. No place has ever reduced abortions by making it illegal. With Roe versus Wade, the year before Roe versus Wade, there was 130,000 illegal abortions. The next year, there was 18,000 illegal abortions. So that means that we did not put 112 ladies in distress. The big
That's
one, just
time.
one more thing.
I'm sorry, that's
Okay.
time. We're moving on to Steve and Carrie. Steve, you get to ask a question first of Ms. Rude.
Okay. I'm a fisherman, and sometimes I spend more time trying to catch something than actually catching something. But we have the DNR is putting muskies in Gull Lake, and I'm kind of curious about how they decide what they're going to do. Do they have to come to the legislature and ask them if they can do this, or do they just get to do whatever they feel like doing?
Well, the Muscogee debate has taken up much time and much committee hearing at the legislature. But this is a program that was put in place many years ago. And it was, there was pilot programs on it, and there were studies done on it. And there was a goal to do X amount of lakes in so amount of time. Gull Lake was chosen because muskies are naturally breeding in Gull Lake. So many years ago, they dammed up Gull Lake, which took out the natural production of muskies in the lake. So it was deemed that that was a lake that there was always natural production. There was a natural strain that already lived in the lake. So it made sense to stock that lake and make it a good fishing resource. There were other lakes that have been stocked. I do believe the program has been stopped now. And right now with COVID, we are not harvesting any walleye eggs or stocking any fish at all because it's just not possible with COVID. But it is a debate. There are people on both sides of that debate, but I will tell you that the economics of what it's done to Gull Lake, because muskie fishing is really in the fall when the resorts don't have many people come to their resort, and they stay there, and it really helps with the fishing pressure too, because those people are in the fall when they're not fishing the walleyes in the summer.
Thank you. And Carrie, would you like to ask Steve a question?
Well, I guess I have the same question as Senator Gazelka. You know, we haven't done parades or community events, or it's been a little different challenge for campaigning, and I think we really pretty much met tonight, which is really odd. But I have not seen, I know the voters' guides came out and everybody has their statements, but I have not seen where you have mentioned your position on life and the Second Amendment. So I guess I'd be interested in what your positions are.
Okay. I went to Catholic school, and Catholic school not believe in abortion at all. They don't believe in taking any kind of a life, whether it's somebody that's been around the earth for 50 years or somebody that hasn't been born yet. I consider myself pro-life. I don't think they should have abortions. I'm a big proponent of adoptions, and a lot of good stories come out of adoptions. I've been hunting since I was like 8 or 9 when I first went out hunting with a shotgun out in the woods, duck hunted, deer hunted, shot just about everything I can have or that you can legally shoot. I've always used a shotgun as far as personal protection because you don't have to be a good shot like with a pistol, and so all you have to do is point the shotgun and mission accomplished. Nobody's going to be picking on you. So that's how I feel about guns.
Ms. Rood, you would like to use your first rebuttal response. You have 30 seconds.
I would. As you know, hunting and fishing have nothing to do with the Second Amendment. I have had a permit to carry since 1993, and I don't think I hunted before I had a permit to carry. The Second Amendment is very different than hunting, and so I guess everybody hunts and fishes up here, but that's different from the Second Amendment. So I guess I'd like to hear your, do you believe in gun control or the red flag laws, or that's a very important piece to the Second Amendment.
So
says
just a minute. So if you'd like to use your response, you can, but that would be, yep, go ahead. You have 30 seconds, Steve.
Oh, I'm
You have
supposed
30
to answer?
seconds.
If you want.
If you want.
If you want.
Oh,
You don't have to.
Oh, well, I'll answer. I play like that. But, the Second Amendment says a well-regulated militia. And the word regulated means rules, So I don't know exactly what the rules were back in the 1700s or whenever they wrote that. But a well-regulated militia is what they had to have when the British came over here. We didn't have an army, didn't have a government, and so that's why they wrote that up. So yeah, I believe that people have a right to defend themselves and to be locked and loaded.
Okay, thank you. We're going to move into audience questions, and this first question goes to you, Carrie Rude. It's about housing. How would you address the shortage of affordable housing and the ongoing problem of homelessness in Minnesota? You have 1 minute.
1 minute, wow. I've been a realtor for 30 years and I haven't solved it yet, so I don't know if I can in 1 minute. I've been a very big advocate of changing the housing, like in the Brainerd Lakes area. We have old housing stocks, and a lot of times we sell that old housing stock to a family, and we expect them to be able to heat it and to take care of it, and it needs so much maintenance, so we set them up to fail. And I think we should take some of this old housing stock, take it down. We then have a lot that has all the amenities to it. You have sewer, you have water, you have roads, you have schools, and take some of this old housing stock that's just sitting there and rehab it. Put something new, something that a family, something that you'd want your grandchild to live in, not an old house that's drafty and moldy. So I think we have a lot of ability in the Brainerd Lakes area to reuse some of these housing stocks and the infrastructure that we have already.
Thank you. Mr. Samuelson, your response to how would you address the shortage of affordable housing and the ongoing problem of homelessness in Minnesota? You have 1 minute.
I didn't even realize that we had homelessness in Minnesota or in Brainerd until a couple of years ago, and it was pointed out to me. And then now that I've been told, I can see it. And that's sad that we have a housing problem. The idea that Carrie just floated out there sounds like a really good idea. I don't know who is going to be paying for all that, but it's sad that we don't have some kind of even a homeless shelter here in Brainerd. I don't know if that's something that's in the works or what, but I know they have them down in the cities, and so I think that homelessness is getting to be a major problem, and a lot of it has to do with mental illness and stuff like that also, and we're very lacking in the mental health field.
Thank you. Mr. Gazelka, you have 1 minute.
Yeah, well, first of all, lining up jobs and education so that people that can work are pointed in the right direction so that they can afford their housing. And mental health, I will tell you that we added 5 mental health crisis centers in the last bonding bill. That was $10 million for 5 facilities. If we do a bonding bill this year, we'll have another 2 in there, so that's another way that we work on it. And then we do provide resources for developers for both workforce housing and affordable housing in the housing bonds that we try to do. And then one other area that I don't think was mentioned is regulations to build in Minnesota are significantly higher than, say, Wisconsin. I mean, like dramatically higher. And so if we can figure out how to get rid of some of the regulations that are just driving up the cost, then all of housing is more affordable.
Thank you. Mr. Peters.
Well, we have something we agree on, Mr. Gazelka. But I think just to add on to that, we need to beef up our technical school. My wife, she has 4 sons. She wanted one to be a carpenter, one to be a plumber, one to be an electrician, and what was the other one? A mechanic. Okay. Sorry, couldn't think of that. We need to have more people to help people like Alex get his job done. with quality helpers. So that's what we really need to do, is beef up the amount of stuff like this. Actually, I was just in a study with the University of Minnesota. The population is going to go down, but our biggest problem is housing on there. We don't have housing that we could draw people up here to fill some of these jobs. And with that, we will continue to, like I said, we need more tech school and people going there.
Thank you. So we have time for one more audience question, and then we'll move into closing remarks. So this next question, Mr. Samuelson, you'll be answering it first. What can the Senate do more than it has already done to combat human trafficking? 1 minute.
What can the Senate do more to try to?
What can the Senate do more than it already has done to combat human trafficking?
Okay. I'm not sure what they've already done, but and so that would help if I knew what they've already done. But I know that a few years back there was it was all over the paper about a big trafficking ring and people coming to town and taking girls off the street and selling them and all this kind of stuff. And it, you know, it just it needs to be a very punishable deal if people are doing that kind of stuff. So that's about all I can say on that.
Thank you. Ms. Rude?
Well, I think it's a big issue that we've worked on a lot in the Senate, and I'll tell you one of the projects that I've been involved in is called the Red Sand Project, and the women of the Senate bipartisanly got together, and we did this project, and then we sent it across the state and to other states, and what we did is we took red sand, and so many times the trafficked women fall between the cracks. We don't see them. They're invisible. And we need to start being aware and really educating people on what to look for these women and these young girls and young boys. And so we put the red sand in the cracks of the Capitol on the lawn in front. And we took a picture of all the women doing this, and we sent it around. And then we sent red sand to other women in other states so that they could do it too, to bring an awareness to this terrible problem. And so I think we are really aware and working on it. And I was proud to be involved in that Red Sand Project.
Thank you. Mr. Peters, you're up next. 1 minute.
Yep. Well, right now I'd have to talk to some people about this. It just happens that my son-in-law runs a company that is training the people in India, the police force in India and Buffalo, New York, on how to prevent human trafficking and how the police can recognize it and how to work it. So I'll have to talk to him about that. I also have a friend sitting in the back there that has worked heavily, Eric, has worked heavily on human trafficking and that type of stuff. So that means I will have to spend time talking to them to fully understand what can be done in the state of Minnesota and what hasn't been done.
Thank you. Mr. Gazelka?
Just a quick story. My wife and I were at a church event a few years ago, and there was a woman that was there that had come out of prostitution, which we knew because we befriended her. But she gave me a hug that night, and that was the first time she'd ever hugged a man other than her husband, just because she had been so violated as a woman, as something precious. And since then, there's been a number of times that I've actually carried the bill to provide more resources for particularly women. It can be men too, coming out of trafficking, so there's beds for them to go to and a way for them to find themselves out. And then it's been mentioned a couple times, but just educating people about what to look for when you spot a hotel or you spot things that clearly say that something is wrong here, so that we don't just let it pass. I mean, this is a terrible thing that we allow in our society, and anyway, I'm glad we're all in agreement.
Thank you. So we're going to move into closing statements. We're going to start with Mr. Paul Gazelka. You have 1 minute.
First of all, just thank you. I mean, it's such an honor to serve and in the role I have now in particular. But I'm 61. I don't think I've ever felt like the issues before us today and the importance of this election, it just doesn't seem like it's ever been this high. I've never seen the violence across our country and a lack of respect for our police and just the takeover of our towns. I've never seen the cancel culture. Anything that's Western culture, doesn't matter if it's Abraham Lincoln or Christopher Columbus or whatever, they want to wipe out every statue, take everything down, and people not having the courage to just stand up and say, no, this is part of our culture, and the new communities coming in, you're part of our culture too. And so it just feels like from the president on down that this vote is really, really important. And so I'm glad I have a chance to serve. I'm committed to at least this next term, which is 2 years, but I appreciate every moment that I've had the opportunity to serve. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Peters?
Well, first of all, again, thank you. I really appreciate the chance to talk here on this. But we have to work for what's best with the community. What I didn't get to finish when I was talking, Mr. Gazelka and I will agree on one very thing about abortion. We want to reduce abortions. We want to get them as low as possible. What has shown to be the biggest cause of abortion is poverty, next is sex education, and then just the general feeling that women are not supported, okay? We have to handle that. We have to find ways to take away the reason for abortion. So we'll work with that. I think if I were elected, probably technology would be one of the committees I'd be good at. Public health, because I had COVID and I also I went $200,000 in debt because I spent 200 days in the hospital. And we just need to work together and work toward the common good. Thank you.
Thank you. Carrie Rude?
Thank you. Thank you for this evening. It's been just delightful to get to meet you and to have this conversation. And so I really appreciate that. One thing that we haven't talked about tonight is diversity, and that's something that people are talking about all around the country. And I will tell you that I work in a wonderful place in the Minnesota Senate that is very diverse, with lots of conversations. And I wrote them down here because I don't want to forget any of them, but we have Latina Torres Reyes, Senator Torres Reyes. She's marvelous. And we have Fong He and Senator Hayden, and we have Bobby Joe Champion and Senator Franson. And I think this year we are going to have the first Indigenous senator ever in the history of the Minnesota Senate. And I have the privilege to work with all of them. But we don't look at them that way. They are senators. We are all on equal footing. Everyone is just a Minnesota state senator, and that's the importance. And we work there, and we are honored to work there. And so I would be very honored if you would send me back to St. Paul, because it's a wonderful place to work, and I hope that I have honored my community in the way I've represented you.
Thank you. Mr. Samuelson?
I want to thank Senator Gazelka and Senator Rude for serving, and House members that are serving right now. I think it's a big honor to do that. I know that as a person, I feel good when I get to help somebody. And growing up around politics and, good friends with attorney generals, I'd be out knocking on doors and run into somebody who's got a problem, and it's a red tape problem. And just to say, here, call up this number, tell them I gave it to you, and help them fix that problem. And I know that that's the best part of the job, that the reason why people do it. So I just really appreciate anybody who serves, puts their name out there, and going through this whole process. Appreciate everybody for being here. Thank you.
Well, thank all of you for being here. How about a round of applause for our candidates?